and we're going to start to let everyone in. Welcome everyone to our Satsang with Francis Lucille. Welcome, Francis, and thank you for being here. And we're going to start to let thank you for being here for the Pure Presence book study. The Perfume of Silence has been our book study, as you know, for the last, I think we're on about 18 weeks now. Would you say that, Jenny? I think it's about
at least that. I think it's a bit more than that now. Yes.
Right. And the invitation for Francis is not really to cover specific content in the book, although you can, because there's a couple of areas of the book that I have a question, and we have a few people that have sent emails in with questions. And if you would find the hand raise feature for your questions, please use that. If you put a question in the chat, put a nice big Q in front of it. And of course, we would prefer that you come on the screen and ask your questions directly. So if you emailed me, I'll invite you to ask your question directly of Francis. And Jenny and I will share the host position. So she'll ask questions. She'll invite you to come on and unmute your mic, etc. Francis, Lucille, welcome to our group today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Jenny, where would you like to start?
Shall we invite Diana to come on?
Yes.
Diana, are you here? Would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question to Francis?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Perfect.
Hi, Francis. Yes, well, I had a question about control, the attempts to control versus the knowing of freedom. What I found in my inner experience is that there's an increased understanding of the distinction between my attempts to control my experience and just allow freedom to be. The ease and the beauty of that continues to deepen in my inner experience. So as I explore that, I also see the increased attempts in the collective, in our collective society, to control versus the restrictions of freedom in our collective. And I see how that would never work. The attempts to control in our society just will not work, as they don't within my inner experience. So as we've gone through so much within the last year and a half or so, I just was wondering if you could speak to your experience, how your inner freedom impacts how you navigate this collective, the collective restrictions of freedom, if this is in fact your perspective of it. So I was just wondering if there's anything that you could share around that.
There is real freedom, absolute freedom. And there are relative freedoms, which are simply the reflections or symbols of the absolute freedom. And these relative freedoms are the ones you, as I understand your question, you want me to address. And I would simply say this, that we are society. Otherwise, society is just something which is abstract, an idea, a mere concept. But real society begins with each of us. How we treat society begins with how we treat our partner, our children, our parents, our friends, and the strangers who life puts us in contact with. If we live the absolute freedom within, the nature of these relations with society is different, changes. For instance, we don't care what people think about us. We are not afraid, and we don't want to provoke either. But we stick to our gun of freedom, if you will. We stick to this deepest inner freedom. Now, this inner freedom is twofold. There is freedom from and freedom to. On the path to freedom, freedom from comes first. And freedom from is freedom from worries, freedom from fear, freedom from the belief to be a separate soul, a separate entity, freedom from belief to be a fragment. And as a result of this freedom, we become, if you will, a happy camper in life. That's the best definition. It's not about being able to achieve all kinds of mysterious exploits. No, it's rather being ordinary, living an ordinary life, but at the same time enjoying this freedom within, freedom from sorrow, freedom from fear, freedom from death. And then in the world, this freedom will manifest also, because when we live this inner freedom, the outer freedom, the freedom of serendipity and of miracle, the freedom to create, comes into existence. But that's something that we shouldn't even be talking about, but rather experience. Going back to society and how we live our life, as I've said, the first and most important aspect is to live this freedom within the context of the moment, not ideological freedom, but the most important is the actual freedom to be free and to allow for others to be free, but not theoretically, not politically, no, the ones we really relate to, the ones which belong to our actual experience. And then eventually also on the level of concepts, ideologies, etc., to be a defender, if you will, or a supporter of freedom in general, because freedom is symbolically freedom in society is symbolically a reflection of this inner absolute freedom. However, this freedom in society, there are various versions of it. For instance, the first freedom is the freedom to be alive. The freedom not to be killed. The freedom not to be mayhem by others. So that freedom requires, in turn, in the kind of society we live in, which are deeply in ignorance, requires laws and law enforcement and defense by the military, the police, etc. So it's more complicated because the freedom to be alive requires a restriction on other forms of freedom that are not as important, because if you are not alive, the relative freedoms come to an end. So the relative freedoms, they are about a kind of fine-tuned balance to be found between all kinds of varieties of freedom, such as the freedom to be alive, the freedom to speak, the freedom to interact with others, the freedom of thought, the freedom of exercise, of religion, etc. The freedom of one's body. That being said, in case of doubt, I always tend to err on the side of freedom.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Deanna. We have another question from David Rose. He's in Sydney. And thank you for coming and raising your hand. And he sent a question by email, but please ask directly. Unmute your mic.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Francis.
Hi, David.
Francis, it struck me this last couple of days, the apparent extreme dichotomy of the so-called masculine and feminine poles of being, in that I was asked to endorse a book by a group of women about how men are wasting their money on sort of exploring space, and they were advocating hunkering down and protecting the earth and caring for each other. And at the same time as this longing for that realm, there was this Jeff Bezos just returned from a space exploration shortly after Richard Branson did the same thing. And so this sort of, it seems like an apparent polarity which is increasing as time goes on, and I'm wondering what that represents in terms of the experience of those apparent polarities. I mean, I know that ultimately there is no polarity. We're all the same, but it's hard for me to reconcile. It seems an extreme presentation to me, so I'm wondering how to make sense of this. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, I think I'm not sure this question really relates to the main topic of our conversation, because it relates to the manifestation. It relates to phenomena, right? It relates to men and women, or more generally to so-called male and female tendencies or attributes or qualities, whatever we call them, according to which men would be more talented for, I don't know, mathematics and physics, and women more for history and poetry, and I don't know. But these are, in a certain way, artificial categorizations. I know some women who are very good mathematicians and very good physicists, and they are very, very woman-like. And on the other hand, if a man only has these male attributes, playing rough sports and drinking beer in sports bars, and etc. I mean, it's such a man is only half a man. I think the beauty when we become interested in this truth is that the opposite qualities in us, the ones that are usually assigned to the opposite gender, also develop in us. And a well-rounded human being has both these feminine and masculine qualities. Sometimes it's funny, I remember I was teaching a calculus course in some college here, and some young ladies came and they didn't like the fact that I was using so-called male examples in my exercises, in mathematical exercises. But unfortunately, a lot of mathematics, when you try to apply it, you use physics. And if you consider physics as male, obviously the trajectory of a heavy body in a gravitational field is going to be considered to be a male subject. But it's ridiculous to say that. So I don't think actually, contrary to what that these differences and this dichotomy is getting more marked in our society. I think it's quite the contrary. I think the technology and the technical or technological evolution of modern societies tends to blur those differences. More, I mean, I'm old enough to have seen a huge change in this regard when I was young. Most women didn't work. So the women and men lived in separate worlds somehow, most of the time. Now, women and men alike work, and they work together. So then there is much more sharing, much more blending in this regard. Anyway, it's not, thank you for your question, David, but I'm not really an expert any more than anybody here. And besides, I am biased because I have only one view, right, of the situation.
Can I ask just, this is a slightly different question, but is it your experience? I'm a very keen golfer, and I was having a particular issue with some problems with my golf, and I couldn't seem to resolve it. And I was thinking a lot about it. And I turned up to golf, and my usual partner wasn't there. And this guy, who was a great tall streak of a guy, absolutely brilliant, and seemingly conscious fellow, turned up. He was like my perfect teacher, just appeared in front of me, showed me everything I needed, and gave me, and it was such a wonderful experience of freedom. And it appears that the more aware or resting in awareness that I can be, that these sort of experiences, like life just comes to me. I don't have to go looking for what I need. It just shows up. Is this your experience? Is this what a joy to live like this?
Yeah, you know, it reminds me, I've told this story already. There is a Sufi story according to which the Prophet Muhammad, in his early days, he was not a skilled speaker, and he had this desire to become a skilled speaker. And later on, when he became a truth lover, God appeared to him in his dreams and tells him, I'm going to make an excellent speaker of you. To which he answered, yes, but Lord, you know, now that I have you, I don't have this desire any longer. You are enough for me. And to which God answers, yes, I know. Nevertheless, you once had this desire in your heart. And therefore, I will make you such a good speaker that your name will be pronounced 5 times a day on all the minarets on the surface of the earth. So the idea of this story, I don't know whether it's true, right? Because it, you know, the Sufis, they were able to make up stories to make their point, right? So anyway, it's a beautiful story, but what it tells us is this, is that desires we had in our childhood or earlier on in our lives that were innocent in their first expression. But then ignorance took hold of this desire, and ignorance takes hold of an innocent desire with the thought, I will be miserable if this desire doesn't get fulfilled. At that moment, there is an I, the happiness of whom is hostage or is dependent upon the fulfillment of this desire. Before this thought comes, the desire is innocent. Oh, it would be nice to be able to speak in a brilliant way. That would be nice. That's it. Doesn't mean that I'll be miserable if I cannot speak in this way. But then ignorance comes in. I, as a person, I need that. Otherwise, I'd be miserable. Now, what happens is that later on, ignorance disappears. It's no longer there. One is fulfilled and content no matter what. As a result, this pre-existing desire recovers its innocence. In other words, it becomes impersonal again. And an impersonal desire is just the announcement of its upcoming fulfillment. So it's wondering, it's extraordinary to see as you become more and more stable in this peace, that all desires, innocent desires you once had, get fulfilled. Such, I would like to have a very, very good drive, right? I would like to tee off, in beautiful ways. And something was not correct because I always had this hook. And then this teacher comes and tells you, just relax, just, I don't know, don't move your head or whatever. And all of a sudden you see how easy it is to achieve that which, my thing is not golf, it's tennis. And But it's the same. I'm 76. I still improve my game. At the same time, my body doesn't improve. So it's a race between the improvement of the technique and the aging of the body. So, but it's great fun. You see, it's great fun. But I was just pinpointing, if you will, the serendipitous aspect of life. That once you, that's what I was referring to earlier on as the freedom to, not just the freedom from, but the freedom to is this miraculous aspect of life that, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Even in the small things such as your game or your drive.
Yeah. Marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Francis. Beautiful answer, and seems like a maybe a silly question, but I really felt the answer was for many of us. Thank you, Francis. We have Rob, your hand up. Would you please unmute your mic?
Hello.
Yes.
Hang on, I'll get the video on if I can. Hi, Francis. Lovely to speak to you. I kind of discovered some spiritual videos on YouTube about a year and a bit ago, and it was after I had been searching for happiness in various other places and not finding it. And after watching these videos, I pretty quickly was able to recognize myself. And when I recognized that, it was just immediate like feelings of joy and bliss and my mind was clear, my body felt very relaxed, and it was lovely, you know, of course. And for about 10 months it was like that, like I was living like that. And I was able to, you know, function really, you know, well in day-to-day life, and various like parts of my egoic desires and stuff were kind of being just were falling away, it felt a bit like. And yeah, it was very beautiful. And then about 2 months ago, I had this this feeling of panic that came. Excuse me, very, very intense feeling of panic that came. I felt like I was dying. That was the feeling. And I kind of just sat with it, you know. I tried to just sit with it, you know, as the awareness, but it didn't go away. The feeling didn't go away. It stayed, you know. And because my experience prior to that of recognizing myself was that when I recognized myself, there was no fear in that moment. So when this fear was there, I was still able to recognize myself as, you know, my true position, but I was feeling that I was doing something wrong because the fear wasn't going away. And because of that, I was making it worse and worse and so on. And I went to the doctors, and they gave me some medication, which I didn't want to take because I knew I needed spiritual guidance, but I didn't have any at the time. So I took them for a while and came off them because I didn't like how they made me feel. And now it's like I'm feeling kind of better, but there's a lot of anxiety and confusion in the mind, a lot of tension in the body, and just a general feeling that I've gone wrong somewhere. So do you have any advice for me on that?
You see, when what we call the recognition of what we are may be more or less complete.
Mm-hmm.
Every time the recognition is true, But this recognition, this glimpse of what we are, doesn't necessarily reveal our universality. It may reveal, for instance, oh, I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. I'm consciousness. And this revelation can only achieve through a glimpse of our reality, of our consciousness. And as a result, we may experience in the body a state of elation, of relaxation, of relief. And in the mind also a state of peace. But it may be that this revelation has not revealed yet the universality of this consciousness. In other words, it has revealed I am consciousness rather than the body or the mind. But it has not revealed I am universal. As a result, something needs to be still accomplished, if you will. The sign that something needs to be accomplished is the reoccurrence of fear. And the fear will seem to be even more obvious in this case because the first recognition has already clarified the landscape, if you will. Before there were all kinds of elements that were hiding the true nature of the fear. For instance, it could have been fear of not being accepted by others, fear of not being loved, and now all these fears have shown their true face. Fear of absolute disappearance. And for instance, just to illustrate what I said, let's say someone has fear of being in elevators. But why? Well, the fear of being in a confined space and that the elevator is going to, there will be a breakdown, or that the elevator is going to fall. And then what happens? Either I get there and I die asphyxiated in this confined space, or I died as an outcome, as a result of the fall of the elevator. And then if I die, the body dies, right? Then there is my absolute disappearance. So you see, all paths of fear, they start with an elevator, or they start of being afraid of the crowd, or they start of being afraid of not being loved. For instance, if I'm not being loved, I'm going to be excluded from the pact. And then I'm going to be left alone and die, right? Not being supported, not being. So all the fears, they come down, they come back to this central point, the fear of absolute disappearance. So now that's the one that shows up in these moments of panic. And the problem you faced is that you try to manage this fear. You try to use some kind of meditation. in fact, the intent to suppress it. You try to control it. And that's not the proper way. Because when you try to control it, it means that you are afraid of the fear. You don't want the fear to control you. You don't want the fear to eat you alive. You don't want the fear to kill you. So it requires courage in these moments, because these moments are in fact moments of opportunity. They are opportunities to go to the roots of fear and to finish the job. How to do it? Welcome the fear. But to welcome the fear doesn't mean to welcome the fear with the intent to kill it. That's not very welcoming. It's like you are welcoming someone at your door with a big baseball bat behind your back, right? As soon as he enters, poof, you want to kill the guy. No, it's not very welcoming. No, welcoming is to embrace, to really, and in this case, to welcome the fear and to allow the fear to kill you. That's the path. That's really the meditation, and it is often completely misunderstood. Now, it's really a test of the intensity, of the strength of our love for the truth. This is really a moment of truth. Actually, you find that in all traditions. Look in all esoteric traditions. Look, for instance, the gargoyles, on the churches. They are like monsters, And they had the same thing in Greek temples, frightening statues that the purpose of which was to tell the incoming people, go away, so that only the pure of heart, the ones who truly wanted the truth, had the courage to drive past these frightening figures. Symbolically, that referred to this moment on the path. And there is nothing more that I can add to that, because, as I said, it's a moment of truth. Can I die for the sake of truth? It's a form of the ultimate sacrifice, if you will. And of course, we don't die. That which dies really is ignorance. That which dies in this moment is death itself. So what I'm telling you is go for it if you can. It's not if you can. Really, go for it if you will. If we don't have the courage to do it, it's only a matter of time. Sooner or later, we'll do it. Every time we come to the threshold, if you will, where the gargoyles are, the monsters are, they don't want us to go past them, we go back. Every time we come back, we'll get a little closer, and at some point, we will move past them. And at that moment, when we move past them, their frightening aspect will change and they will welcome us with a big smile.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. It makes sense what you said about, you know, it's definitely the experience that I had, what you said.
It requires, you know, the love for the truth, the interest for the truth grows by itself. The intensity grows by itself. And at some point, the threshold is reached, and then you go to the other side.
Yeah, because it felt like I could see that I didn't want to face that at that moment. And I felt like, what can I do if I don't have the courage to do it? Like, what can I do about that?
And hey, I know you can't put your hand up. I couldn't find the icon either. So would you like to unmute and ask your question now?
Yes, hi. I have some connection issues, so I've put my video on, but I'll just put it on, off. I'll put it off. I'll put it on to let you see me, and I'll say.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, my question was very similar to Rob's, because I'm a lot older than Rob, and recently I've been having intimations, quite a few intimations of mortality. And it's raised a lot of existential fear, which could be, it comes in the form of the thought, I'm an old woman. And that's not a very helpful thought apart from anything else. There are times I know that the body and the world and the mind is in me. But this attachment to the separate self is it sticks hard.
Yes? It seems that I cannot hear you.
Oh, let me do something. Is that any better?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Right. Right. Okay. I'll start it again. It's also about. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also about existential fear and intimations of mortality from the body. And it makes me think I'm an old woman. Now I know that sometimes that consciousness and the body is in me and the world is me. Sometimes I understand that, but just like Rob, there are times when, yes, that the fear is strong. Even though I have come close to death a couple of times, and it was very, very peaceful. And even once, I wondered if I wanted to come back. But when I did come back, I got very attached to being back.
So what can I do? What's your question?
Yes. It was very helpful what you said to Rob. And I wonder if you have anything to add to that, and perhaps not. How to manage.
No, I don't hear you.
Okay, I think it's my. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put my video off. It's just how to manage the fear. Do you have anything to add? I mean, my question was very similar to Rob's,
Yeah.
and maybe you have nothing to add to that.
Well, we shouldn't manage the fear.
Yeah.
We should understand the fear and the fear comes from a belief, a very simple belief, which is that our reality, our real self, is mortal. That's all. It's mortal and limited and vulnerable and can be affected. Not necessarily even mortal, because it could be immortal, but still be affected by other things. So we have to discover the impossibility for our reality to be affected by other things. And in order to do that, we first have to discover what we really mean when we say I. What is our real self? What is our real persona? What is it that is afraid of dying? And if someone would ask you, would you rather lose your consciousness, your awareness, and keep your body, or keep your body and lose your awareness? What say you?
I'd keep the consciousness. There's no.
Right.
There's
Which
no. Yeah.
And which shows that the centrality of your identity is awareness, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So rather than your body and rather than your mind. So by mind meaning everything you perceive, your thoughts, your memories, So once you have established that, the question that remains, okay, is this: how do I know that this awareness, which is hearing these words right now, is limited, is mortal, for instance, or can be affected by things? How do I know that? Experientially. Because what other people pretend to know, including whatever Francis is telling me, is not relevant to me. Because to me, the only thing that matters is my consciousness and what I can know about it. What other people tell me is not experiential. Therefore, I can take it as a hypothesis, but subject to verification, pending verification, right? So you are the final judge in this matter. So regarding the possibility that consciousness can be affected, ask yourself, is it my experience that my consciousness has changed? Not my body, not my mind, not the world around me, because these three elements are constantly changing. But consciousness, the reality that perceives all of that, has it changed? And how do I know that it has changed? What say you?
It doesn't change.
Yeah. So
No, it
then,
hasn't changed.
that's something very strange, right? That I believe, so I am of two minds. And on one hand, experientially, I have no evidence whatsoever that it has ever changed, that it has ever been affected by anything it perceives. But nevertheless, because other people believe that way, I am following the party line, if you will, I am following the herd mindset, and I believe that it changes. I believe that it can be affected. I believe that it dies.
Yes, that's absurd.
How? I mean, look,
Yeah, I know.
I believe that consciousness dies. Who is there who comes to me and tell me I have had the experience of the death of my consciousness?
I guess nobody.
Right. It's just, I mean, it's such a simple, basic, self-evident statement that the death of consciousness cannot be experienced.
Yeah.
Because in order to experience the death of consciousness, that would require an experiencing consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And same thing about the beginning. Ask yourself about your beginnings as consciousness. Do you remember?
No.
So, if you don't remember, you cannot have any proof that it has ever begun. And only you can remember the beginning of your consciousness. Not your parents, not Francis, nobody else. So if you don't remember the beginning of your consciousness as an event, it opens the door to the possibility that it has never begun.
Yes, it's certainly a possibility.
Yes. Now, the question is, would you admit that this possibility is at least as probable as the possibility that it has begun?
Yes.
That's very important. That's very important for the following reason. Because, what is the rational approach if you have a question which has two possible answers, and you have absolutely no clue which way to go? How do you allocate the probabilities between these two options in the total absence of any element of information? The only rational way is to say at least 50-50, right?
Okay.
Because you don't know.
No.
But so regarding consciousness being universal, meaning being the reality of everything, if it is real, let's say, it is real, unaffected by anything. universal, versus mortal, impermanent. You should really allocate the probability by saying, I don't know one way or the other. I truly don't know. I am as much open, exactly as much open to the possibility that it is eternal, universal, divine, as that it is mortal, impermanent, and based on a human body-mind. We have to be truly honest with ourselves, because our reason may tell us, yes, it's 50-50, but then there will be a gut feeling inside telling us, no, no, I have to go with the herd. I have to go with the party line. It's very unlikely that consciousness is universal and unlimited. So we have to fight this so-called gut feeling using our reason, using precisely the arguments I've used and which have convinced you, because these arguments are not purely intellectual. They come from the actual experience of consciousness. When I was asking you, do you have any evidence? You went to the experience of your consciousness. That's how you found out. So it was not an intellectual answer to my question. It was more than that. It was, in fact, experiential. So because it was experiential, it's always there. You can always go back to that which seems like a line of reasoning. But it is a line of reasoning that takes you to the actual experience of consciousness. And the answer, I don't know, comes from that experience. So it has a power. It has experiential power. Mm. And because it has experiential power, over time, it will erode the gut feeling that is not the case. That is not the case. It's too far-fetched. It goes against what 99.99% of people believe. And that experiential understanding will give you the courage, to overcome the conditioning that we have inherited from society, from our parents, educators, etc. And then we'll be in a state in which we are completely open to the possibility that consciousness is universal. And that's all that is needed. To be open, completely open to that possibility, and to live in accordance with it. To perceive, to think, to interact with people, to react on the events in the world, etc., in accordance with this new possibility. And you see, as you do this, that life becomes a permanent miracle, which it already was, in fact, right? We just didn't see it. And now it becomes blatant. So that's the general idea. Trust your intelligence, trust your experience of consciousness, what it tells you, and most importantly, what it doesn't tell you, that you are limited, mortal.
Thank you very, very much.
Francis, can you take another question? We have a few more in the queue.
Please, yes.
Okay, Ndego, you had your hand up a long time. Could you unmute and ask your question? Can you unmute? That's
Yeah.
better.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this whole talk. I wrote it down so I can remember. I had a brain injury 2.5 years ago, and let's see. Oh yeah, so I'm still having similar experiences in the body. And I just keep getting, my mind on my, sorry. So I never know, like, I just have this pain and stuff like that. And my thought was just to stop everything when I have that experience and just to let it be whatever is happening. Just let everything, whatever is happening, just be what it is. And so that's what I've been doing. And I just wanted to get your input and or suggestions. But yes, I'm just trusting everything and letting everything just be. And I know it's not me.
Well, your brain was affected, but the consciousness that perceives the thoughts and perceives the sensations was not affected.
Yes. Yes.
It was the same you who perceived the child you used to be, then the teenager, and which is perceiving your life, the events in your body, in the world, in the mind. So the events change constantly. The mind was affected. But what is important is to understand, to see that the consciousness was not affected. Can you see that?
Yes.
Well, if it was not affected, it means it cannot be affected. It is free.
Thank you.
So then whatever happens in this freedom. And in fact, whatever happens from this freedom, and in this regard, you can trust. You can trust life. Knowing that which is essential of you is unshakable.
Thank you.
If we have time for one more, Lindsay, have you got a quick question? Would you like to unmute? Hi, Lindsay, unmute. Can you unmute, Lindsay?
Good?
That's it.
Okay. Hi, Francis.
Hi.
I was actually, do you guys want me? I wrote the question from last time we met about the toothbrush being seen. Is that still,
That was my question too, Lindsay. Go ahead.
why don't we, you know what, forget about my question because it kind of was a sequel to some of the other ones that were here, but I do want to know about this. Okay, Francis, on page 193 of your book, you wrote, the toothbrush exists only when it is perceived. And so my question is, when do objects obtain existence in Maya? You said, so or in my personal example, the opposite of, meaning my foot, I'm reading off my email, my foot has hurt for a year. I decided to just stop checking it, stop thinking about it so much. Now it rarely bothers me. Perceiving is continuous, but is it a matter of focus, attention that brings something into existence? And I don't know if Jenny, you can add to that question, but I was using a personal example of something that was bothering me as I was noticing it, thinking about it, being aware of it all the time. And then when I stopped that, I really haven't had as much trouble. So is it just when something appears that
Lindsay, I'll just read, Francis, the bit that you're referring to from Perfume of Silence, chapter 13. It is not only strange that I find the same body each morning in the mirror, but it is equally strange that I find the same toothbrush there. The toothbrush exists only when perceived. It is created at the moment of perception, then vanishes into nothingness when it is no longer perceived, and is recreated when it is perceived again.
I wouldn't that's a description of our experience. We have to make a distinction between our experience of reality and models of reality. For instance, in science, we have various models of reality. In physics, we have two main models, general relativity and quantum field theory. Each of them describes a certain aspect of reality, but they are not mutually consistent. So reality is both described by both models or none of these models. Let's switch that to what in philosophy are the main models that explain the apparent persistence of the toothbrush. One model is called the realist model. According to realism, there is a world out there. In this world, there is a toothbrush. This world exists while not being perceived. There is another model called the idealist model. The toothbrush exists only when perceived. That's our human experience. But when we express it in this way, our expression is only a model that describes our experience. It doesn't mean it is universally true. In fact, we don't have any phenomenal experiential evidence that enables us to tell which of the two models, the realist model and the idealist model, is true. Just as in physics, we cannot choose really between these two models we have. It may well be that there is no model. It may well be that there is a model, but the human mind has no access to it. So that seems like a dead end. And in fact, it's a moot question to ask, does the toothbrush really exist or not while not perceived? Not experientially exist, but really exist, which is different. However, that's a bad news. We cannot answer these questions from our human perspective, from our human experience. But the silver lining is that it doesn't matter. Because in both cases, whether the toothbrush is made out of thought, of perception, or whether it is made out of matter, if there is only one reality, the thought the toothbrush is made of in the idealist model, and the matter the toothbrush is made of in the realist model, are both made of the same reality. So when we move from any dualist interpretation, such as the two cases in point, to the non-dualist perspective, then these questions don't matter. Experientially, it boils down to the same. Let me try to explain to you. Experientially, the toothbrush is perceived experientially from the human perspective. We are not allowed to say that it is not made from anything else than perceptions. But if we look at perceptions, sense perceptions, they appear in awareness. They exist in awareness. They disappear in awareness. Therefore, their substance, their reality is awareness. So in the idealist perspective, the true nature of the toothbrush is awareness. Now, in the realist perspective, the toothbrush belongs to the world. the body belongs to the world. If bodies have a real existence, the mind and the body are connected. Therefore, the reality of the mind and the reality of the body is the same. The reality of the body and the reality of the world and the reality of the toothbrush is the same. If there is only one reality, right? But experientially, the reality of the mind is nothing else than awareness. So the reality of the mind, awareness, is also the reality of the body, also the reality of the world, also the reality of the toothbrush. So the toothbrush is made of awareness, also in this case. It's only from a dualist vantage point that there is a practical difference between these two viewpoints.
So it's not a matter of what you're focusing on. You just know that it is all, everything is made of consciousness, of awareness. So it doesn't matter whether it's appearing or not. You just know that its ultimate reality is awareness.
The ultimate, what is important is how we define awareness. And I define awareness as the reality which is hearing these words right now. In other words, I don't define awareness as something which is related to perceptions, solely related to perceptions. I define it as a reality that perceives, but the reality that perceives is not limited to perceiving. Perceiving is an attribute of the reality that perceives. But perceiving doesn't limit the reality that perceives. For instance, there can be other attributes to the reality that perceives, to reality. For instance, the reality that creates, or the reality that loves, or the reality that understands.
And your definition of the reality is that which is, or that which is the case.
Yes, that which is the case. Yes, that there are various definitions. You could take that which cannot not be, that which cannot not exist. In other words, which is the same as if reality is that which cannot not exist, it means that which exists by itself and from itself, that the existence of which doesn't depend on anything else. Therefore, that which is also cause of itself. Causa sui, that's so, and that's also the definition of God by Spinoza, so a substance infinite, I don't remember his exact definition, but infinitely infinite, infinite in all possible, with an infinity of attributes. That which is cause of itself, that which cannot not exist. But therefore being, because being comes from the experience that there is something rather than nothing, right? There is something rather than nothing. The moment we agree that there is something rather than nothing, being is the thing which is. Being is this something. Now, we may be mistaken. We can say, okay, here there is a computer, therefore there is something rather than nothing. Well, not quite. Because what is the reality of the computer? You see? Does the computer have being, or does it have merely existence? Did it create itself? Or does it depend on the aluminum and all the other materials it's made out of? So you will discover that everything is dependent, that we know in the world is dependent upon something else. But ultimately, there is something, right? The moment there is something rather than nothing, there is being. And the moment there is being, non-being has to be excluded. Non-being is simply a false hypothesis. It is falsified by the fact that there is something. So being and non-being are not, there is no duality between being and non-being, because being is. And therefore, non-being is not. It's a false duality. That's why there is no duality. There is only being. I think it's too brainy. I'm going to stop it here, right?
The toothbrush is being.
Wow, that
Thank you,
was
Francis.
Thank you,
Thank
Francis.
you so much.
an amazing end point for our time with Francis. Francis, thank you for that. Wow, that was worth the whole ticket price. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Francis, Lucille, and Jenny. Thank you, everyone that has been supporting us in the background, Cindy. And thank you, everyone that was brave and asked your awesome questions and joining us for this time with Francis, Lucille, and Francis. Again, thank you. Blessings to you. And we'll see you all next week for chapter 14 in The Perfume of Silence. And thanks for staying late for us too, Francis. That was awesome. Bye, everyone.